Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one's going to be for K213 Darkness Falls, second last episode of Book 2 Spirits. And yeah, this is a really good episode, and we're properly in the finale now. And in a way, I think this episode has just as many memorable moments as the last episode itself. It has, I think, a couple of the best moments in the series, and is also it has one of the most emotional, dramatic moments as well, with what they do with I suppose the past avatars and the wisdom of the past avatars specifically. It's an impactful moment that has kind of caused controversy. Some fans like it, some fans don't. I'll get to talking about it when we get to that section. But there's a lot going on in this episode. It's the villain, I suppose, in its final form, kind of coming into fruition. It's a big loss. It's the kind of down before the high of the next episode, and also it's a strong Tenzin moment. It's his arc coming back into play, and I really liked how they've managed to do that with him. That he and Korra haven't been together for the entire book, but you've had this start moment that creates an issue between the two of them. They came back together a couple of episodes ago after Korra came back from Beginnings, and you developed it a little bit more. You had them come back together, and now you're kind of setting up Tenzin to be able to, I suppose, give him his moment where he can help Korra. And it's really well done with the arc they give him just in this episode. So let's get into the episode in depth and cover the Tenzin side, which is obviously right now not overly linked to the other bit, but it's obviously Tenzin, Kaya, and Bumi, the Katang kids, looking for Jinora. And we see them kind of aimlessly wandering around the spirit world. They don't really know what to do here, because obviously Tenzin knows technical things about the spirit world, but has never been there before. Similar with Bumi and Kaya, it's all of their first time being in the spirit world. They don't really know what to do. And you see a little bit of their arguing, but you see the development is there, that it doesn't this time round end up with them really having a massive feud with each other. It's just them having sibling arguments without acknowledging that they're kind of past all of the kind of stuff from their childhood. So I thought that was quite well done, and just kind of setting up the idea that they're sort of wandering around in a circle. They come across that kind of centipede-like spirit and the friendly mushroom spirit, which I think is a really nice reference. It's a really fun little thing of just friendly mushroom, the reference to what Sokka said when he was on the cactus juice, and here's an actual friendly spirit mushroom. That's a pretty nice moment. And they end up coming across Iroh, which I think is a nice little moment to just establish that they knew him. Him mentioning that it's been 40 years is that's I suppose their last time when they saw him, which means that Tenzin was 10 at the time. Obviously that means that Aang was still alive. So it's a pretty cool thing just to see Iroh actually was alive for a good bit longer still. That means he's it means that he's where he is currently in the show. It means he's gonna live at least another God, if it was that 40, it means he's probably gonna live another about 50 years or so. It's 40 something years anyway, I think. So that's interesting that we're not expecting Iroh to die anytime soon in the comics or anything like that, and it getting confirmed here is pretty nice. And again, he just kind of gives the advice of them to be cautious, and it's getting very dark in the spirit world right now. It's dangerous. You shouldn't go. And he gives that kind of that warning that ends up kind of alerting Tenzin to the fact of the fog of lost souls, where even the lost can't find you, kind of type thing. And he knows about the fog of lost souls, so immediately gets the whole group captured by this spirit, sent to the fog of lost souls, this kind of spirit prison. And here's where we get, obviously, I think the core of this kind of section, this arc, in that the spirit has the effect on humans of basically having them, you know, kind of infecting their mind and making them kind of relive their kind of darkest memories. And we obviously get this with all three of them, but it's more subtle with Bumi and Kaya, to the point where, like, you can almost dismiss it. But like Bumi talking about being like surrounded by cannibals, obviously suggesting that, like, he has all these kind of fun stories he likes to tell, but he obviously has some darker stories where some bad stuff happened to him during his time in the United Forces. And clearly, you know, at some point he was attacked, his group was attacked by a group of cannibals, and something pretty terrible happened, if this is what they're establishing to be, like, Bumi's darkest memory, because he seems terrified by this, and I don't think it's made up. I think we're purposely meant to read into this a little bit, but I don't think they wanted to tell in a massive amount of detail this story about Bumi dealing with cannibals. And then with Kaya, it's another one where they don't really touch on it all that much, but little things that, like, Tenzin said about Kaya earlier on in the season, you can sort of connect the dots of, like, Kaya kind of left the family for a certain amount of time to, you know, find herself, as Tenzin said. And here she's talking about, like, not having a family and, you know, not wanting to be tied down. Almost that, like, her darkest memory is, like, this regret that she has over kind of leaving her family for so long and only returning after Aang had died to kind of comfort her mother. That's a really interesting dynamic to kind of have, that she feels sort of guilty in a way for forgetting about her family for a certain amount of time, not wanting to be a part of them, wanting to be free, and sort of interpreting, taking it that too far almost. So just these little things that, like, connect with other little things they've established for the character, I think it works very nicely. And then Tenzin's one, I suppose we'll cover Zhao before Tenzin's one. I like how they use Zhao to sort of explain, like, how long do people stay here for? And here's Zhao, who was taken away at the end of, like, book 1 of Avatar. So it's been, like, you know, 71 years he's been in here. He hasn't aged, but he's still, like, alive, but is still focused on, you know, capturing the Avatar. He sees Tenzin and thinks that it's just a grown-up Aang, when in fact there are more airbenders now. And it's just it's a nice reference. It's on the level of, like, a Professor Zay, of just this thing that happened in in Avatar, that, okay, if you're going to be exploring this sort of stuff, it'd be a cool thing to reference. The Zay one I thought was fairly obvious, because anytime you go back to Wan Chitang's library, you sort of have to address Zay because he's there. But with Zhao, I think this comes prior to us really understanding what exactly the ocean spirit did to him. Of, like, you could easily just interpret it as, like, the ocean spirit just drowned him and his body's just underwater. But the idea now is that, like, oh, the interpretation of that scene is now meant to be that the ocean spirit, like, dragged him underwater and, like, transported him to the spirit world, with the implication that he's still alive, sort of being that his soul, his spirit, was taken out of his body, so he wouldn't actually just die, but, like, his body is dead, but now he's just, like, this lost spirit in the fog of lost souls forever. Which is really kind of dark, but I think it makes sense of, like, he killed a version of the moon spirit. Going to the spirit prison makes complete sense, I think. And it's an interesting thing, the fact that there is a prison, and it seems like notable spirits are able to just, you know, seemingly put people in there if they annoy them. So that this thing exists for a reason. But great reference using Zhao like that. So yeah, Tenzin's arc. I think the fact that, like, Zhao even comes up to Tenzin and, like, talks about Tenzin as if he is an older version of Aang adds to it a lot, because then when Tenzin's left on his own, his kind of darker memories, his kind of biggest fear in a way, comes up, and that is not being able to live up to, I suppose, the legacy of Aang, not being able to be the main airbender continuing things on, not being able to be the kind of the spiritual guide that his father was. And as when he gets the vision of Aang, it brings up all of the issues that you've sort of seen be brought to the forefront of, like, he's put so much pressure on himself to be like a copy of his father. That's what he feels is what he has to do. That's what's expected of him, is to just be Aang again. And so Aang just giving him the advice of, like, no, you can't ever live up to being me, because you're not me. You're Tenzin. You do things in your way. And just this idea that, like, you can try to do your best to continue on the legacy that I established, but you do it in your own way, not by kind of being me. And it's this very important lesson of just him kind of looking at, I suppose, in a way, the person he wants to be, the person he tries to force himself to be, and just that person morphing into himself, and him just basically accepting his failures, accepting that he can't do everything that Aang did, but that what he does himself is him doing things in his own way. And I thought that was a really nice piece of advice from Aang to give to Tenzin, because it's going to set up for the last episode a very good piece of advice that Tenzin, as Korra's mentor, can give to her. Tenzin can't be Korra's spiritual guide, but he can always be just a mentor, someone older who always looks out for Korra and can give her advice in other ways. In that, like, he's already taught her everything he knows about airbending, so all that's left now is just to be this kind of other, like, almost father figure guide to her. And here is a perfect piece of advice to be able to give to her, given, I think, the situation that Korra finds herself in by the end of this episode, with regards to, I suppose, how she views herself and what her identity is, with regards to being the Avatar. But we'll get to that when we get to that side of the story. But just Tenzin breaking free of the fog of just, in a way, like, accepting his darkest memory and being freed from it to the point where, like, he now doesn't have any, like, dark memories, so the spirit doesn't have any hold over him. He finds Jinora, gets his brother and sister, takes them all out, and is the sort of hero of this situation by accepting himself. And I thought it was really, really, really well done, and just them accepting that, like, their younger brother saved them. And yeah, just the ending of this kind of setting up Jinora's important role in going into the finale, because notice that immediately upon leaving the fog, she has these light butterfly spirits around her, and it seems like she is this kind of light spirits are being drawn to her, that they can be kept light around Jinora, and it's establishing that her connection isn't just that she gets on well with spirits, but that she actually has an ability with spirits to be able to, I suppose, in a way, like, interpret their energy and keep her energy stable and, like, powerful enough to be able to have a small impact on the spirits around her, keeping them light to a degree. So that's a very important dynamic to have, given that by the end of this episode, Raava, who is basically the representation of how much light there is in the spirit world, is basically nothing. Obviously, she can never be fully gone, but the idea is that this is Raava at 0.00001% light, 99.999% darkness. And because of that, there's not many light spirits left that are going to be able to help anyone. And so that's the importance of Jinora here, being someone who is exceptionally spiritual, who can actually keep some spirits light, with regards to having a certain amount of light to be able to shift the balance back into favor, so that Raava can become, like, visible again. Because the idea, as you see by the end, is that Raava is just these little kind of, like, sprinkles of dust almost of light. That's what's left of Raava after Unalaq's attack. And so Jinora being able to have some light around her, if she brings that toward, in regards to where Raava is, she can make kind of Raava become a little more whole again. Because we know that the size of Raava and Vaatu represent the balance of light and darkness, and if you can shift it in a different favor, you can obviously make the light bigger again compared to the darkness, in the same way that throughout Beginnings we saw Vaatu get bigger as Raava got smaller. Now we're kind of building towards kind of getting the reverse. So pretty cool stuff, as Jinora basically says, this spirit will guide you out of the spirit world. I still have work to do. And I think it's her being able to sense that the energy of the world is kind of going crazy here. That she knows that there's a certain amount of light energy that she has, and that will be needed to kind of shift the balance. That she can have this effect by being able to, control spirits in a way. And that, like, Unalaq, one of the big advantages he has here is that he has a certain control over the spirits. That the spirits let him kind of use them to a degree, and that you often see him like riding in on some sort of a spirit kind of manta ray type thing. And the idea is that Jinora has a very similar effect, but on the other side of things, that it's more of a friendship with the spirits rather than like a command over them. And so, that's the interpretation that we're meant to have here, of just that Unalaq and Jinora are two of the more spiritual people here. Korra has spirituality more because she is the Avatar, whereas Jinora like has a true talent for spirituality like Unalaq does, and this being a key battle going into play. But just it sets up her in the next episode really, really well. As for the Korra, the main arc here, obviously Vaatu is freed, and immediately what we get is we have to keep Vaatu and Unalaq from merging together. And immediately that places a lot of importance on Mako and Bolin. They have to keep Unalaq out of the spirit world. And basically, for as long as harmonic convergence happens, up until, Korra can basically trap Vaatu. And I like how it nearly happens. Like, the fight, given that Korra has like control over the Avatar state at this point and stuff like that, the fight is a little bit more even in Vaatu's favor, because I suppose the idea is that Juan, even though he just learned the ability when he fought Vaatu, that because Korra isn't as spiritual, she struggles a little bit more because she's sort of younger, I think, as well than Juan was when he fought Vaatu. She struggles a little bit more against him, but eventually she does take the advantage in that fight and is like seconds away from sealing him away in the Tree of Time again. Until, of course, Unalaq comes back in. And again, this is where you see Eska and Desna having a big factor in things, in that they basically do most of the work fighting Mako and Bolin outside, hiding in the trees around the entrance to the portal, and them, doing well to hold off and defend as much as they can, but, there's only so much they can do against three very powerful waterbenders, and this obviously is meant to set up a scene where Eska and Desna can have a conversation with Mako and Bolin, but it allows, obviously, Unalaq to go into the spirit world. And I like how they do this, because they play these two scenes quite well, of like, they're having this more kind of relationship, like, fate of the world is on the line conversation, as some very, very crazy stuff is happening in the spirit world. And I suppose we'll cover Eska and Desna first, and then get to the more like crazy stuff that happens with Dark Avatars and so on. I like this because Mako again hits on the real issue here, bringing up the idea of like, Unalaq doesn't care about you anymore, and it really hitting Desna hard, and him admitting for the first time that, yeah, my dad was going to let me die when I was hit by that energy at the portal. And they both are kind of like, yeah, but he told us to keep them out. But they are honestly having these doubts, and this, combined with what happened before in the last episode, you really see why they're kind of conflicted, and how they eventually come to like join the other side, kind of realizing that it has gone too far. And they get to that point because you have this Eska and Bolin scene, which I think in the build-up to this, I thought they were just done with this. But they managed to do a really interesting thing with this scene, and that is, to honestly make you care a little bit about this relationship, which was borderline like abusive, basically, how they presented it before. But they managed to, like, I think tonally just get this scene right, in that Bolin actually kind of still likes her, and how Mako kind of sees it as like, oh, you're acting, aren't you? Because like you talked about how you wanted to get out of this relationship as soon as possible. and then, but then, like, we of course see, like, that Bolin sort of in a way, like, is facing the camera when he says, you know, yeah, it was acting, but we see that it was honest, kind of like true emotion, that he does actually like Eska to a degree. Now, ultimately, where they go with this is that they more or less say that, like, it was sort of heat of the moment, that there was some sort of a spark between the two of them, but it wasn't enough to be like they'll be together forever type thing. But enough to, in the kind of heat of the moment, like, kind of point out to almost Eska that, you know, there's other things going on here. You know, don't focus just on your loyalty to Unalaq. The fate of the world really is on the line. Can you not sense, like, the energy in the air that if your father accomplishes what he wants to, there'll be no time for anything if this happens, and they sort of end up agreeing with this. So that's a kind of a pretty well done scene. And then, you know, of course, Mako and Bolin get injured when they kind of run back into the spirit world because it's Dark Avatar Unalaq kind of attacking them. But yeah, the other side of things, of course, is, you know, the Unalaq comes in, stops Korra from, you know, imprisoning Vaatu, and more or less very, very quickly, this is when the formation of the Dark Avatar happens. Vaatu goes inside Unalaq, they go over to the portal and use it to kind of merge, because harmonic convergence is happening at this point in time. Notably, I think they do have him go to the, like, opposite portal, so they don't use the same portal that, like, I think Wan did to actually, like, become the Avatar. I might be slightly off with that, but I think that's the more or less kind of the way they did it, or the symbolism of the way it's kind of meant to be. One uses one uses the other, because the area that they're in is kind of like this yin-yang thing, and I'd kind of be shocked if they didn't end up doing it that way. But either way, he becomes the Dark Avatar, and it's an interesting one because it's a different type of thing here, in that, okay, it's a different spirit, but fundamentally, like, Vaatu is just the opposite of Raava. The difference here is that Unalaq only has water bending, so it's a Dark Avatar but with only one form of bending. And it's interesting because I think there's been a lot of discussion about, like, you know, could Unalaq get the other elements? And I think the ultimate answer is, based on what we know right now, no. Because the line turtles aren't present in the world anymore, or, like, there's no obvious way to find one immediately. So, like, there's a way for him to do it, of course, but it would take him basically going through the exact same journey as Wan. He'd have to find the other line turtles that have the ability to grant him the other elements. He'd have to train himself to be able to hold them and do the same thing that Wan and Raava did, and then he'd be a fully, fully functioning Avatar kind of being. But I think it works here because, like, you see that, like, Unalaq is in a way like the master of waterbending. He is one of, if not the best waterbenders who doesn't have one of these kind of crazy bloodbending techniques, and it makes sense why he is so powerful, because he's meant to, over the course of this book, be like the master of waterbending. That's how strong he is, and so just having that one bending gives him a huge advantage, even if he's fighting Korra, who has all four. And I love this fight. I really like the fight that happens between avatars here. One, because it's one of the best examples in Korra of just two characters fighting with really big bending going on. I love the choreography. I like the intensity that's happening here, because it is this really cool dynamic of light avatar versus dark avatar for the fate of the world. It's niece versus uncle, and this is two family members fighting each other. All of the kind of, like, history over the course of this book between them, the ancient history between Raava and Vaatu, it all works, and it's an excellent fight because Unalaq's doing some crazy waterbending moves, and then Korra's doing kind of crazy every single bending, and you can see that it's very, very even. Korra maybe has a slight advantage because she has a little bit more kind of variety in what she's doing, but you can see the power level is super on par because it is, powerful spirit enhanced bending going up against each other using their kind of respective avatar states. And I I never understand really why this fight isn't really brought up. I think it is a factor of the fact that so many people just, I think, dismiss book 2 overall. It's either book 2 is the worst and they leave it at that, or they say book 2 is the worst except for beginnings, which is okay. Whereas I'm kind of like, you know, I like nearly everything in book 2, in that I don't really have much problem at all. So I really like this fight, and especially compared to like the book 3 big fight at the end with like Zahir, this is like a million times better than that fight, because that's not really much of a fight at all. And then the story stuff behind it is obviously interesting in book 3, but I think the story stuff here is, again, much more interesting because of the stakes at play here. That these are, no one else can get involved in this fight. That's the level that this is on between the two of them. I love the sequence where kind of Unalaq tries to kind of crush Korra between the two kind of sheets of ice, basically. And basically for the first time, more or less, Raava talks to Korra. And you have her inspiring the human side of the Avatar, and kind of saying, we will not lose. And it's an amazing scene. You kind of have this kind of 100% connection between the human and spirit side of the Avatar here. That, I think, for sure is what the kind of golden glowing is meant to sort of represent here. That this is not just the Avatar state, this is the Avatar state with like harmonic convergence energy added in, and just complete merging of one and the other. And it's just this amazing sequence when she just, goes after Unalaq and gets the advantage in the fight. And, it eventually comes down to this kind of water kind of lock thing. Their hands are locked together with the water. And then I suppose the reason that Unalaq gets the victory sort of here is because the unique factor here is Vaatu, because he's not as connected with Unalaq, is perfectly fine with sort of separating an aspect of himself out of Unalaq to kind of, fight Raava one-on-one. And so I suppose the lack of being able to expect that Vaatu would kind of suck Raava out of Korra like that, and it's intense because you sort of know what's happening here. Like if you've kept track of sort of the mechanics that they're going for now, this is a meaningful, really meaningful moment, because Korra now doesn't have the spirit that makes her the Avatar within her anymore. And you can tell that it being sucked out of her has just completely taken all the energy out of her. And it leads to one of the more kind of tragic, dark, really emotional and intense scenes, but it's very well shot. The music in this scene does a great job of getting over how important this scene is. Of just Dark Avatar Unalaq just going to town on Raava freed from Korra's body, and basically destroying Raava more or less. But how they do it, of just each blow over time destroying the memory, the wisdom, the knowledge of a past Avatar. Seeing like Aang go first, then Roku, then Kyoshi, and then they kind of do them like multiple at a time, and you see all of the different Avatars. This is the first time we get to see like a better view of some of these like older Avatars, and just seeing how ancient this thing is, and it just being like ripped away by these attacks, and especially at the end, just like Raava kind of going into nothingness. And it means a lot, because Raava's not just this kind of mechanical aspect of what the Avatar is. We've got to know Raava as a character, so it's meaningful as like a death of a character, but also the sort of the memories and kind of in a way data that she kind of held within her, that was a key part of the Avatar. And now that that's gone, it's this utterly hopeless moment for Korra, because it's Korra witnessing, I suppose, the death of the Avatar, the loss of the cycle in a way, on her watch, and being helpless here as a dark Avatar is about to take over the world, and her job of like trying to keep light in the world being completely, completely failing here, as darkness is taking over the entire world, and Mako and Bolin are taken out. She's out of action. She really has no option to counter this, and it's it's just this moment of it's over. And obviously it's meant to signify that by the fact that with the world now in complete darkness, we see Vaatu basically take on this kind of ultimate form here, Unavaatu. And like obviously I wish they'd emphasized this a little bit more, but I think it's definitely present here, that they've set it up the entire time of like, when this merging of Unalaq and Vaatu happens, like, he won't be your father anymore. This will be the loss of his humanity, because whereas Raava sort of doesn't really have all that much of an... she doesn't really change all that much about who the person that she's in is. This is Vaatu not really caring about that and actively changing him. And we see him become the monster, him lose his humanity. This moment of like Unavaatu forming is to a degree the death of Unalaq as a character here at this point in time. And I think it's meant to be signified by the fact that who were the first kind of couple of people that they cut to the second we see Unavaatu forming. It's Eska and Desna walking to the spirit world, and this is the first thing that they see. They know it's their father. They know that what everyone has said up to now is true. He's become this monster. They more or less didn't care about them. And now they're just there at as much risk as anyone in this situation. They weren't included in his kind of grab for power here. This is them witnessing effectively the death of their father. And, you know, I like that they give Eska and Desna that moment. They don't just focus on Korra's reaction to it. They keep everything that's important that's going on in mind, and I think it works really, really well that the writers kind of remembered that this is a very important thing, because we're trying to get over Eska and Desna as characters here as well, that they're important here, that they've always been this kind of key factor that's kind of turned things in Unalaq's favour, but now he's completely abandoned them, and they now have every reason to kind of fight against him and oppose everything that he's doing, because he's gone and they don't want what he's trying to accomplish to happen. And it's a crazy way to end the episode with just Korra out of action. She, you know, obviously at this point we're not really sure about like, what does this mean with regards to her being the Avatar. Obviously the spiritual aspect of it is gone, but like what does that mean for her bending? Is she just a waterbender now? Or does she still have the four elements? We'll obviously find that out in the next episode, and I'll go in depth on that. But crazy way to end an episode, amazing cliffhanger in that I almost would have loved to have seen what the fandom's reaction would have been like if there was a week break between this episode and the finale episode. It was obviously cool to get 4 episodes on the same night when it originally aired. But this is such a cliffhanger. I would have loved to have seen what the speculation is heading into the next one. That's the one sort of negative at times when you get so many episodes at once, is that certain things don't get discussed as much, which is sort of the issue with like the airing of book 3, in that like the first half of book 3 we got over the course of like 3 weeks. We got like a 3-episode premiere, then 2 episodes, then 2 episodes, then obviously the craziness happened, and we'll talk that throughout the book 3 rewatch, but we'll get there. Final thing to talk about is, I suppose, the fan reaction to this, and the fact that this is a permanent thing that happens in the series. Korra becomes the Avatar at the end of the series again, but the past Avatars are still lost. Their wisdom is gone. It's just Korra. Korra is effectively the first in this new line of avatars, the second merging of the spirit of Wan in a way, and Korra is Korra's the first in this new one. And it's interesting because I in a way don't get most of the reaction that was like negative towards this, of like, so many people who feel that they should have immediately done something to like reverse this, or like her get the past lives back, were the exact same people who heavily criticized the book 1 finale for like, oh, like Aang just gave Korra all of her bending back, gave her the Avatar state and stuff like that. And it's just like, which do you want? Do you want everything to just be reversed immediately, or do you want stuff to be permanent? And I get they're 2 different situations, but I feel like most of this kind of critical reaction was, I think, just not thought out particularly well, in that, wait, you wanted Korra to just have the exact same journey as Aang, gaining the elements back? Like, we've already seen that before. And then in this case, it's a situation where, like, there was enough time between book 1 and 2 where this could have been a direct reaction to the criticism of the book 1 finale, of them kind of going that, you know, people criticized us when we just reversed a big moment and didn't linger on it long enough. So let's just do something even bigger and commit to it and not give it back over the course of the entire series. And I get it. Like, it's a sad thing, because I think such a cool aspect of the Avatar is their ability to talk to the previous iterations of the Avatar. But I think the benefit of how big of a moment you give Korra in the finale outweighs, like, having these characters kind of always there to give her advice. I think they give Korra such a strong moment as a character of her accomplishing what she does without having the past lives, that I get why they did what they did. That they wanted Korra to be in a situation where she didn't have a get out of jail free card in the Avatar state. And I think it was almost written that way, of like, it was purposely meant to be this case of, by the end of book 1, she's done enough to kind of connect spiritually with herself, unlock the Avatar state, and, you know, because of that, there is a benefit, which is the same benefit that people are talking about when they criticize the book 2 decision. There's a benefit to having a connection with the past avatars, and that is that their wisdom, they can teach you things, and they can do aspects for you, which is the whole energy bending thing that happens in book 1. So it's purposely meant to be, I think, this situation where Korra is helped out by the past lives, but now she's put in a position where she has to do something on her own, and is now going to have to tackle, you know, the issues of, like, now that she technically isn't the Avatar anymore, can she keep going? Because one thing we know from book 1 is that she defines herself by her bending. A lot of this book, she's talked about how to her family that all she's ever wanted in life is to be the Avatar. So it was such a cool thing for her to find out that she is the Avatar, and it hurt her that her training wasn't done the same way as the others. So this is her life's work, in a way, gone. So she's in this terrible state emotionally, physically, everything. How is she going to kind of continue on from here without the advice from Aang or anyone else? And then also not really having like Jinora, this is a situation where, like, Jinora can't, like, spiritually help her through this. So this is a point where she really, really needs someone who is just there for her. Her friends are taken out, and it obviously opens the door for Tenzin to be the one to come in and give Korra some personal advice here that's going to help her through this, to give her the strength to fight back here. And I think, in that sense, some aspects of the book 2 plot, I think, are a kind of like borderline kind of masterfully done. And I think the Tenzin Korra arc over the course of this book, with kind of Unalaq in there as the kind of teacher who teaches her things but doesn't have her best interest in mind, that is really, really, really well done here. And how strong the arc in the final episode is, I think, is just amazing. So I don't have an issue with them keeping this as a permanent thing, because I think if they really wanted to, they could write in a way to get the past lives back. I think there's a way where they can do something where, like, if Korra searched the spirit world, she could probably find some sort of a, like, trace of each of the past lives, and she could find that and kind of reincorporate that into Raava. Because the interpretation here is that treat Raava as, like, this kind of USB stick in a way. That, you know, she is present in all of the avatars, and the data from each new reincarnation of Wan is put onto that USB stick. So the idea here is that Unalaq destroyed the memory stick, and all that data is gone. And Korra basically reconnects new data stick but it's the same Raava, but just she's been emptied, the data has been deleted, and it's going to start again. That's the easiest kind of, like, analogy to use to understand it. And the idea is that because it's spiritual stuff here that we're dealing with. We're dealing with basically memories and the data of like other people, but who have like a relation to Korra and Raava. Because it's spiritual, is it fully gone because of this? And this is another factor of like, how does the spirit world really relate to characters' deaths, the afterlife, and that sort of thing? I think there's a way where like using potentially the Tree of Time and the spirit world itself, or like a search through the spirit world, where like there's a way where you could get the past lives back if you wanted to, but also I don't mind if they don't, because I think Korra to a degree remembers some of the advice that the past lives kind of gave to her, and it means that the Avatar now in a way has to start again, but it starts from a point of like Korra is overall I think in a better situation than Wan is, because she is aware of the overall history of the Avatar. She doesn't have to start from zero again. It's been set back a bit, but because it's starting with an Avatar who kind of is at a point where like the history of the Avatar is so well known, it's not as bad. So I respect the show for committing to such a big decision, and I haven't had too much of a problem with it, because you know, they can cover the past Avatars in their own stories. And I think that's the core of this, is that I don't think fundamentally most people are upset because we're not going to get scenes of like Korra talking to Kyoshi and stuff like that, or Korra talking to Karuk. They'd be nice, they'd be cool to get. I think fundamentally it's the sense of people assuming that this means that we're never going to get information on any of the past Avatars ever again, when even since then, we have got information. Like, Shells gave us extra information on Avatar Kyoshi. And it's all up to the writers of the comics and stuff like that at this point to decide, I want to tell a story focusing on the Fire Avatar before Roku. I want to tell a story about this Avatar. And that sort of thing. It's up to, you know, elsewhere to tell us those stories. And I don't think we should have to just rely on the past Avatar's relationship with the current Avatar as a way to, you know, through Korra basically get information on the past Avatars. Why not just tell their stories? Like Yang Chen, we got news about Yang Chen in the Rift, and the Rift came after the series had come to an end, but it's said in like, that's obviously Aang kind of learning that information. And so you can just use the timeline to tell these other Avatar stories whenever you want. That they are characters, they don't just exist because of like as past lives of the Avatar state. So I think there's always like potential on that front as well, that I don't think that we have to constantly just be locked into the whole, you know, wisdom of the past lives thing. As for, I suppose, the power level of the Avatar state, it's always been one of the vaguer aspects of the Avatar state, of like, it gets more powerful the further on the cycle goes, because you have the wisdom of like more and more people incorporated in. I think fundamentally the raw power is the exact same. It's meant to just be there's extra wisdom, there's extra knowledge of certain techniques and so on, that the other avatars add in. So I think power level wise the Avatar state is the exact same. It's just maybe certain techniques are lacking in that, like currently the Avatar state has like Korra's techniques, and over time it will get back to that level. But I don't think that's as much of a factor, because I think the power is the exact same. Because I don't think it's this thing where it just kind of is meant to like literally, you know, because there's been like 1,000 avatars, it's like 1,000 times more powerful than it is now. I really don't think it's that case. I think it's a more subtle difference in the Avatar state pre and post Raava being taken out at this point. But yeah, that's been the review for Darkness Falls. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.